Welcome back to English Through Wisdom. I hope you learned something valuable from our last lesson. It is wonderful to have you here again today.
The wind tore across the desert like something alive, something angry, and the old merchant ran with his lungs burning and his sandals sinking into the shifting sand. Behind him, 3 riders closed the distance with every breath he took. He was 63 years old, unarmed, and utterly alone under a sky the color of rust. He did not pray for wealth in that moment. He prayed only for one more sunrise. Then, out of the storm, a horse appeared. A rider blocked the bandit's path and did not move. Years later, the merchant finally understood the quiet wisdom hidden inside that single, terrifying afternoon. Welcome to English Through Wisdom. Here we learn English through powerful stories, timeless lessons, and wisdom passed down through generations. Today's story takes us across the old trade roads of Persia into a lesson about kindness, patience, and the moment a forgotten act of goodness comes back to change everything. Before the sandstorm, before the bandits, before the desert nearly swallowed him whole, there was simply a man named Rahim, and a life that most people considered unremarkable. Rahim sold spices and cloth from a small stall near the edge of the market, in a town where every merchant measured success by the weight of his coin purse. Rahim's purse was never heavy. His hands, though, were always open. He was not a wealthy man, and he never pretended to be one. What he had, he gave freely, and what he lacked, he never complained about. His neighbors respected him quietly, the way people respect something they do not fully understand. His own family understood him even less. "Kindness doesn't fill an empty stomach, Rahim," his brother told him one evening, watching him hand half a loaf of bread to a traveler who had nothing. "You give, and what comes back to you? Nothing. Not one coin, not one favor returned." Rahim only smiled, the way he always did when people mistook his patience for foolishness. "Maybe nothing comes back today," he said, "but I have never once regretted a kindness. I have only regretted the moments I hesitated to give one." His brother shook his head and walked away, certain that one day the world would teach Rahim a harsh lesson about generosity. For years, it seemed like his brother might be right. Rahim gave shelter to a sick traveler during a brutal winter, and the man left before dawn without a word of thanks. He lent money to a merchant whose caravan had been robbed, and the merchant vanished into another province, the debt forgotten. He stood between a group of cruel boys and a frightened orphan child near the well, chasing them off with nothing but his voice and his presence. And the boy ran away too ashamed or too afraid to even look back. None of it seemed to matter. His business grew smaller every year. His table grew emptier. His wife worried in silence, watching the man she loved give away pieces of a life that already had so little to spare. There was one memory, though, that stayed with Rahim longer than the others, though even he could not say exactly why. It had happened nearly 15 years earlier, on a night so cold that the stars themselves seemed to shiver. Rahim was returning from a trading trip when he found a boy curled against the base of a dead tree at the edge of the road, no older than 7. His ribs visible beneath torn clothing, his lips cracked from thirst. "Where is your family?" Rahim had asked, kneeling beside him. The boy said nothing. He simply stared at Rahim with eyes that had already learned not to expect anything good from the world. Rahim did not ask again. He wrapped the boy in his own cloak, gave him water and the last of his bread, and carried him to the nearest village, where he paid a family to take him in and care for him until he was strong enough to survive on his own. He never learned the boy's name. He never saw him again. And in the chaos of the years that followed, buried under debts and disappointments and the slow erosion of hope, Rahim eventually forgot him entirely. By the time Rahim reached his 63rd year, kindness had become less of a belief and more of a habit he could not break, even when it no longer felt rewarding. Even when doubt crept in during the quiet hours of the night, when he lay awake wondering if his brother had been right all along. Then came the letter that would change everything. A distant cousin in a neighboring province had died, leaving behind a small inheritance, barely enough to secure Rahim's family for a few more years, but enough to matter greatly to a man who had almost nothing left. To collect it, Rahim would have to cross 3 days of open desert, alone, carrying whatever coin and goods he could gather for the journey. His wife begged him not to go. "Send someone younger," she said. "The roads aren't safe anymore. There have been bandits near the eastern pass." "There is no one else to send," Rahim answered gently, "and we have no coin left to hire a guard. I will be careful. I promise you that." He set out at dawn on his old camel, his small satchel of belongings tied tightly to the saddle, his heart heavier than he let his wife see. The first 2 days passed without incident, the silence of the desert broken only by wind and the steady rhythm of the camel's steps. Rahim allowed himself to hope that perhaps this journey, unlike so many others, would ask nothing painful of him. On the 3rd day, the sky changed. A wall of orange dust rose on the horizon, moving fast, swallowing the light. Rahim had crossed enough deserts to recognize a sandstorm building, and he urged his camel toward a rocky outcrop that might offer shelter. He never reached it. 3 riders emerged from the swirling dust before he could react, their faces wrapped in cloth, their weapons already drawn. Bandits, the kind that preyed on travelers foolish enough to cross the eastern pass alone. "Get down," one of them ordered, his voice flat and practiced, a man who had done this many times before. Rahim raised his hands slowly. "Take what you want. I won't fight you. They took everything: the camel, the satchel, the small collection of coins he had gathered for the journey home." And when one of the riders raised his blade, deciding perhaps that a witness left alive was one witness too many, Rahim did the only thing left to him. He ran. He ran into the storm itself, sand tearing at his face, his lungs burning with every breath, certain that each step might be his last. The riders followed, their horses faster than his tired legs could ever hope to outrun. He stumbled. He fell. He forced himself back up because some part of him refused to stop, even when hope had nearly abandoned him completely. That was the moment the 4th rider appeared. He came out of the dust like something summoned by the storm itself, his horse cutting directly between Rahim and the men chasing him. His voice, when he spoke, carried an authority that made the bandits freeze in place. "Lower your weapons," the stranger said. "Now." "This isn't your fight," one of the bandits snarled. "It is now." More riders emerged behind him, a dozen at least, their formation tight and disciplined, clearly no ordinary travelers. The three bandits exchanged a glance, weighed their odds, and made the only sensible choice. They turned and vanished into the storm, leaving Rahim alone on his knees in the sand, gasping, shaking, alive. The stranger dismounted and approached him slowly. "Are you hurt?" Rahim looked up at the young man standing over him, tall, composed, dressed in the fine clothing of a caravan leader, and felt only confusion. "Why?" Rahim managed to say between breaths. "Would you risk your men for someone you don't even know?" The young man knelt beside him, and something in his expression softened into an emotion far older and far deeper than simple concern for a stranger. He reached up and slowly pulled the cloth away from the lower half of his face. Rahim searched the man's features, waiting for recognition that never came. "I'm sorry," Rahim whispered. "I don't know you." The young man smiled, and there were tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. "I didn't expect you to. I was 7 years old the last time you saw me. I was starving and freezing, and I had already stopped believing anyone would stop for me that night." The desert seemed to grow very still around them. "You gave me your cloak," the young man continued, his voice trembling now. "You gave me the last of your bread. You carried me to a family who fed me and raised me, and you never once asked for anything in return. I spent years searching for a way to become someone strong enough to make sure no one else ever felt as invisible as I did that night. Everything I built, this caravan, these men, this life, it all began with what you gave me on a road you probably forgot within a year." Rahim's hands began to shake, and it had nothing to do with the cold. "The boy by the dead tree," he whispered. "That was you. That was me." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The wind had begun to settle, as though the desert itself understood that something sacred was happening, and had decided, finally, to grow quiet. "I have spent years trying to repay a debt you probably forgot the moment you walked away," the young man said, helping Rahim to his feet. "I never did." Within the hour, the caravan leader's men had tracked down the bandits, recovered Rahim's camel, his satchel, and every coin that had been stolen from him. They gave him food, water, and a place among their fires that night. And in the morning, they escorted him personally to the edge of his home province, refusing to accept a single coin in return. When Rahim finally walked through his own front door, his wife wept with relief and confusion in equal measure, certain she was looking at a man who should not have survived the crossing. "How?" she asked. "How did you survive out there?" Rahim thought of the boy by the dead tree and the man he had become, and the strange, quiet, invisible thread that had connected one cold night 15 years earlier to a sandstorm in the eastern pass. "Good deeds travel farther than we ever do," he said simply. Weeks later, walking home from the market with a loaf of bread under his arm, Rahim passed a thin, hungry child sitting alone beside the road, the way he had passed so many strangers before. He paused, as he always did. He knelt down, as he always had. And without a single hesitation, he broke the bread in half and offered it to the boy, having no idea and needing no idea where that small act might travel next. The idea at the heart of this story echoes a proverb found across Persian and wider Middle Eastern culture, often expressed as neki kon o dar ab andaz, which translates roughly to do good and throw it into the water. In English, we often say something similar with the idea of what goes around comes around, or the gentler expression, kindness always finds its way back. The Persian version carries a particularly beautiful image inside it. When you throw something into a river, you cannot see where it travels, and you certainly cannot control when, or whether, it returns to you. You simply release it and trust the current. This proverb has survived for centuries precisely because it doesn't promise an easy, immediate reward. It doesn't claim that kindness will make you rich, or famous, or even noticed. It simply insists that goodness is never truly wasted, even when the results are invisible to the person who gave it. That is exactly what makes Rahim's story so powerful. For 15 years, he had no idea what happened to the boy he saved. He received no letter, no thanks, no sign that his kindness had mattered at all. By every practical measure his brother used to judge success, that act of kindness was a failure, coin spent with no return. But the boy never forgot. And in the quiet, unseen years between that cold night and the sandstorm, an entire life had been shaped by a moment Rahim could no longer even remember clearly. Now we understand why this wisdom survived for centuries. It was never really about receiving something back. It was about trusting that goodness, once released into the world, keeps moving long after we stop watching it, shaping lives we may never see again, in ways we could never have predicted. There is something uncomfortable about Rahim's story, and I think that discomfort is exactly the point. Most of us want proof. We want to know that our patience, our generosity, our late nights helping someone who never says thank you will eventually be worth something. We measure kindness the way Rahim's brother measured it, by what comes back and how quickly. But real kindness rarely works on a schedule we can see. Have you ever helped someone and never heard from them again? Have you ever wondered, quietly, whether you were being generous or simply being used? Have you ever judged your own worth by what people gave back to you, rather than by what you were willing to give? Rahim doubted too. That's what makes him human rather than a fairy tale hero. He questioned his own choices for 15 years, and he never received an explanation until the desert gave him one on the worst day of his life. What would you have done, standing where he stood, watching years pass with nothing to show for your generosity except an emptier home and a family who worried about you? Would you have kept giving? Or would you have quietly closed your hand, the way so many people eventually do? I would love to hear your answer in the comments below. Has kindness ever come back to you in a way you never expected? Here are 12 useful B2 level words and phrases from today's story. Unremarkable, meaning not special or exciting. Ordinary. Example. His job was completely unremarkable, but he still enjoyed it. Hesitate, meaning to pause before doing something because you feel unsure. Example. She didn't hesitate to help her neighbor carry the boxes. Vanish, meaning to disappear suddenly and completely. Example. The cat vanished into the tall grass within seconds. Erosion, meaning the gradual wearing away of something over time. Example. Years of stress caused a slow erosion of his confidence. Outcrop, meaning a part of rock or land that sticks out from the surrounding area. Example. They found shelter behind a rocky outcrop during the storm. Authority, meaning the power or confidence to control or influence others. Example: the manager spoke with quiet authority during the meeting. Composed, meaning calm and in control of your emotions. Example: even during the emergency, the nurse remained composed. Invisible, meaning unable to be seen, unnoticed. Example: for years, his hard work felt completely invisible to his boss. Sacred, meaning considered deeply important, meaningful, or worthy of respect. Example: Sunday dinner with her grandmother felt like a sacred tradition. Practical, meaning focused on what is useful or realistic rather than ideas or emotions. Example: his father always gave practical advice about money. Trembling, meaning shaking slightly, often from fear, cold, or strong emotion. Example: her trembling hands revealed just how nervous she really was. Debt, meaning something you owe to someone, whether money or a favor. Example: he felt he owed his teacher a debt he could never fully repay. Repeat this paragraph aloud after listening, focusing on rhythm and natural emotion. He ran into the storm itself, sand tearing at his face, his lungs burning with every breath, certain that each step might be his last. He stumbled. He fell. He forced himself back up because some part of him refused to stop, even when hope had nearly abandoned him completely. Rahim never asked for anything in return for his kindness, and for 15 years, it seemed as though the world had simply forgotten his generosity. But nothing was ever truly lost. It was only growing quietly, far from his sight, waiting for the moment it would return to save his life in the middle of a desert storm. Today you learned new English vocabulary, practiced natural pronunciation, and discovered a piece of timeless Persian wisdom about the quiet power of kindness. Keep learning English, keep discovering stories, and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.
If you enjoyed learning English through this ancient saying, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this wisdom today. Until next time, keep learning English and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.